right, Alexander, we are keeping our eye on Russiagate, even though everyone else in the mainstream media is trying to not talk about it. We are still going to talk about Russiagate because this scandal continues to unravel. We now know that the New York Times was lying, spreading fake news. This is now fact. We know that the FBI was disputing many of the articles that the New York Times was writing with regards to Russiagate. We've now got the transcripts and the documentation for that. And we also know, Alexander, that there is a spy in the Trump White House. They call him an informant, but that's just a really nice word for a spy. So let me read you very quickly, Technofog, what he says about the New York Times, and then you can also discuss the spy in the Trump White House as well. These are huge, huge stories. So here's a tweet from Technofog. New docs 2/2017. Peter Strzok notes on NYT Trump Russia reporting. NYT claimed that Trump campaign had repeated contacts with senior Russian intelligence officials before election. Strzok, quote, misleading and inaccurate. No evidence of this, end quote. That's what the New York Times reported. Strzok writes down misleading and inaccurate. No evidence of this. Once again from Technofog, New York Times. Manafort was on the calls with the Russian intelligence officials, FBI, and I quote, we are unaware of any calls with any Russian government officials in which Manafort was party. This is absolutely ridiculous. Technofog, New York Times. Roger Stone was part of the FBI's inquiry into Russian ties. FBI, and I quote, we have not investigated Roger Stone, end quote. We have not investigated Roger Stone, end quote. Alexander, this is damning for the New York Times, damning for the FBI as well, damning for everybody involved. They knew this was all a big lie, the whole thing from 2017. And Alexander, they also knew that there was a spy in the White House. If this is not treason, I don't know what the hell is, Alexander.
Well, this is absolutely terrible, and you're absolutely right. Now, I remember that story, that big story that came out in February 2017. It may have been after the Flynn leak, the one which said, that he'd been doing all bad things with the Russian ambassador. That made this other leak, so-called, which the New York Times published in February 2017, may have been the single most damaging leak of all. It claimed that the Trump administration, during the 2016 campaign, various of its members had been in regular contact with people within the Russian intelligence community. And it was published in the New York Times, and it was republished by The Guardian, and it was the big top story all over Britain, as I remember, and of course in the United States. And of course, it played a huge role in setting the scene for Russiagate. And it turns out it is completely untrue. There's no truth to it. None whatsoever. There were no contacts, no illicit contacts between the Trump campaign and a Russian intelligence. I mean, Jeff Sessions met the Russian ambassador. Michael Flynn met the Russian ambassador. And that's it. That's the sum total. And these are perfectly bona fide contacts. There was nothing like what the New York Times says. Now, the only question for me with that, where the New York Times story is concerned, is did the New York Times make it up, or did these 4 anonymous intelligence sources that it cited, did they make it up? And if so, who were they? I mean, that is for me the only real question now. I think in either case, the New York Times has questions to answer. And when I say questions to answer, I think this is a situation where we go beyond First Amendment protections. I think there should be a criminal inquiry into all of this, because this is straightforward misinformation that was being published by someone with the objective of undermining and damaging the president of the United States, which it did. That's exactly what it did. So
They got a Pulitzer. They got a Pulitzer for it.
Exactly. So this is a very serious thing by the New York Times or by whoever did it. But it's also a very serious story for the FBI, because the FBI knows this story is untrue. So what happens? Does James Comey, who, as we've seen, is uninhibited about going to TV studios and spouting and telling people what he thinks about every conceivable subject under the sun, does he come along? Does he call a news conference? Does he say, this story in the New York Times is completely untrue? There's no truth to it whatsoever. We can say conclusively that, Paul Manafort was not in touch with Russian agents, that there were regular contacts between Russian agents and members of the Trump campaign. There's no reality to this. We don't have that kind of information. He does nothing of the kind. He gives out a mumbled denial at a meeting of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and that's it. That's all he does. So he lets this story live and go on living, all the time that the Russiagate investigation, the Mueller investigation, is alive, and that is outrageous. That is unbelievable behavior, given the damage this is doing again to the United States and to its president. It is allowing the impression that the president of the United States, his campaign, were in contract with the intelligence officers of a foreign power during the election. And Comey and the FBI allow this impression to continue, even though they know it is not true. It doesn't get worse than this. And I've said this so often, I can't emphasize that point too strongly. So the New York Times, terrible on their part. And by the way, incredibly, unbelievably, they're still standing by that story. They're still saying that they stand by their reporting, even though we now know it's not true. So they have serious questions to answer. And I think, as I said, this is a case for a criminal inquiry now. So do their sources, if they're ever tracked down, if they even exist, about which I have serious doubts, by the way. And of course, so does the FBI. Now, I'm going to make a guess. I think that this story is based on the Steele dossier. I think that's where it comes from, because I can't really see any other possible explanation for it. So I by this point, of course, the Steele dossier is, public. But I think that the New York Times conjured this story up out of the Steele dossier, and maybe they got a few former people in the intelligence community to sort of, give it a stamp of approval. But the Steele dossier is the only place where it is alleged in any kind of detail that contacts between Russian intelligence and the Trump campaign was going on. So that's what I think it is. Of course, I don't know that, but that's my guess. And it's interesting that that's come out now, because, of course, we've also had information about the Steele dossier, which is quite shocking, which is that the Senate has now published the FBI's interview with Steele's primary subsource, the single most important source of information for the Steele dossier, who says that it's all exaggeration and rumor and Steele wasn't reporting it correctly and all that. But it turns out this person isn't Russian. He wasn't a Russian official. He was a contract employee of Steele's own company, Orbis. So, how he could even be described as a source is difficult to understand. But consider the timing. The FBI interviewed this person in February 2017, which is exactly the same month that the New York Times publishes this ridiculous, false, untrue story about the multiple contacts between the Trump campaign and the Russians. I wonder, as I said, I wonder whether what happened was that somebody was worried that the Steele dossier's credibility was collapsing, and they got the New York Times to regurgitate the story based on the Steele dossier, which the New York Times then published, and which the FBI let it run without denying that, without saying that it was completely untrue.
We have quotes of them saying it was all untrue.
Absolutely.
Now, we have quotes of them saying they never knew anything about Manafort. We have quotes of them saying they never did anything with Roger Stone. They didn't know of anything going on with Roger Stone.
Absolutely.
We have those quotes now. Lindsey Graham was ecstatic about the information that he found about the Steele dossier the other day, and he made this big statement, and he said, here it is. Now we know as a fact that the Steele dossier was a big hoax. Give me an effing break, Lindsey Graham. You knew the whole damn time. You and all the other freaking rhino Republicans that were in on this coup to overthrow President Trump. All of you guys were in it. The New York Times, the Democrats, the Republicans, the Lindsey Grahams, all of them were in on it. We have all the facts now. All the pieces have been put together, Alexander. Not only that, you have to get into the story. Vice President Mike Pence, one of his staffers, was also in on it. How the F does this happen? How do you get someone in the White House working for the Vice President of the United States, feeding information to treasonous traitors who are attempting a coup against the president? What the hell is going on?
Well, this is exactly, because now we come to the other point that you made at the beginning of the program about the spy, and let's call him a spy because that is what he is, who is in the White House feeding all this information to the FBI. So a spy within the White House, within the Trump administration, passing on information, an informer, as you rightly said, passing on information to the FBI. Now, if you go to Sarah Carter, who is probably the person to really look into this, I mean, she gives a very broad hint that it is in fact Mike Pence's chief of staff. And I think that's entirely plausible. And I'm going to remind our viewers of something that is now widely forgotten, which came out in the autumn of 2018, which is that there was this extraordinary op-ed in, of all places, of course, the New York Times, by a member of the Trump administration, in which he basically said, well, he said it, the title is, "We are part of the resistance also." And this person was saying that they'd been looking at ways of removing the president under the 25th Amendment of the Constitution. In other words, that the president was mentally incapable or physically incapable of conducting office. And it was speculated at the time that this was somebody connected to Mike Pence. And now we discover that the FBI had an informer within the White House, and that informer, Sarah Carter hints, is the chief of staff of Mike Pence. And if you go back to that article, that op-ed, it actually says that they were taking out documents from the president's desk in the Oval Office. They were rummaging through his desk. I mean, it's just unbelievable stuff. And of course, on the 25th Amendment point, we know that Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, Mueller's boss, the person who let Mueller do whatever he wanted to do, gave him carte blanche to do anything and everything he wanted, he was also part of this idea of removing the president and citing the 25th Amendment. So, you asked me the question, what was going on? Well, it's quite apparent what was going on. They were trying to find a way of removing Donald Trump. There is no, it's not rocket science. This is exactly what these guys were up to, all of them. And they were using the New York Times as part of it, is making up stories. The Democrats are obviously part of it. And of course, powerful people within the FBI and the US intelligence community were part of it also. And part of the White House staff were involved too, including, so it seems, the chief of staff of the vice president of the United States. It looks as if the intention was get Trump out of the White House, put Mike Pence in charge in his place, and then, of course, things go back to the way they always were.
It's so bad. It's so bad. Biden cannot win in November because all of this stuff is just going to get swept under the rug, Alexander. This is so bad. All the facts are there. All the pieces have been put together.
Well, what proves that it is so bad is that all the pieces are out there. I mean, can I remind our viewers again that this all now originates from FBI information? Alex said it on the New York Times story. We have the actual words of Peter Strzok. This is not true. Where do they get all this information from? So I mean, this is not disputed anymore. We also have Peter Strzok himself. It's his words. We know from what he himself wrote that they have the informer, as they call him, in the White House. So we're not inventing anything about this. This is not speculation. I mean, we've speculated a little, but ultimately there's not very much speculation anymore. We're reporting facts now, and yet the mainstream media isn't writing about it. Now, that tells you, in my opinion, how serious the situation is. Because, I mean, this is a much bigger scandal than anything else that I can ever remember in the United States. I mean, it would have been, to be clear, a seriously bad thing if, Donald Trump's campaign team had been in contact with Russian intelligence officers. It is even worse, which wasn't true. It never happened. But it is even worse when American intelligence officers conspire, because that's what it was, with sections of the media and with politicians of both the Democratic and Republican parties to remove the President of the United States.
And people in the White House. And conspire with people in the White House as well.
And conspire with people in the White House. I mean, this is so terrible. I mean, it's almost incredible that it can be true, and yet it is true. As I say, we have all the facts now. This ought to be the lead story. It ought to be dominating the headlines. People, it ought to be the big subject. People ought to be, camping outside Jim Comey's door, getting him to comment about this. I mean, Jim Comey ought to be under arrest. I mean, I'm sorry to say that. I mean, this is where we are. And yet none of these things are happening. And that shows you when something of this enormity has been exposed and people are not talking about it, that in fact, this election that's coming up in November is absolutely a crucial one. Now, I understand some people have issues with Donald Trump. I have some issues with Donald Trump. But for the United States, as a constitutional republic, this is now an existential issue. You cannot allow things like this to succeed, and you cannot allow them to be kicked under the carpet and to be made to go away. If you let that happen, then you are no longer in the business of electing the president anymore, because whom you elect doesn't really matter, because people can do these sort of things and simply remove him.
Yeah, this is the story of the decade, the story of the century, this and Epstein. But yet everyone is preoccupied with tearing down elk statues and statues of Frederick Douglass and painting over BLM murals on the street of New York. It's absolutely ridiculous. This is the story. This is the story.
Well, I mean, is it a coincidence? Is it chance that they're talking about one thing? Given that, as I said, it's the New York Times, after all, that started the whole 1619 business. I mean, is it a coincidence that they're talking about these absurd things instead of the really serious, the really dangerous thing that is at the very heart of the United States? I don't think it's any coincidence at all. I think it's a chance. I think it's entirely calculated. I think when they realized that the plot against the president had failed, which it hasn't completely, by the way. I mean, they're still working on it. When they realized that it wasn't succeeding and that they were themselves in danger of being exposed, they did what plotters always do. They tried to shift the narrative.
Yep. If this never gets solved, Alexander, if Biden wins and they sweep this under the rug, I'm sorry. It's the end of the U.S. It's the end of the U.S.
It's an existential crisis for the American people. Yeah. And, we can't say this often enough on this channel. I mean, it's perhaps difficult to get this across, but as I said, it is a fact. I mean, everyday life will change. If you're no longer living in a constitutional republic, all sorts of things that you take for granted will stop existing. They won't be working anymore. I mean, we've already seen bizarre things happening, and I come back to the Flynn case, where a judge, a district judge of the United States, simply disregards an order for mandamus. he won't end a prosecution of a person who the U.S. government says is innocent, and appoints his own lawyer and disobeys the orders of a superior court. That's just one example. I mean, the whole legal system starts to break down. The whole policing system starts to break down. Nothing is as it was before. And everything changes from one day to the other. And what you think and what you say matters less and less.
Yeah, the only way you're going to get this madness to stop, this cultural madness, this social madness, the fake news from mainstream media, the only way you're going to put an end to all of it is if you put some of these people who were behind this coup behind bars.
Absolutely.
That's the only way you're going to get it to stop. Otherwise, they're always going to think they can get away with it. If they can get away with overthrowing a U.S. president, they can get away with anything.
Absolutely. Now, and can I just quickly add, I am a humane man. I'm not somebody who, wants to throw people in prison. There are some situations where, exactly for the reason Alex said, you have to, some crimes are such enormity that if you leave people to develop a sense of impunity, that they can plot against the president and get away with it, and go on leading lives and being promoted to big media channels and getting telephone number sized salaries, then of course, as I said, at that point, your republic is finished.
It's over. Yeah. If they don't get to the bottom of this, it really is over, and everything that's happening on a social and cultural level is going to accelerate.
Yeah, it's connected. Everything is connected.
All right, we'll leave it there. Alexander Mercouris, thank you very much. Guys, subscribe to the channel. Please hit that subscribe button. Please donate to us on PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribe Star. We need your help, so send us a couple of bucks so we can keep on exposing the lies. Duran Shop. Duran Shop.
Absolutely.
Here we merchandise.
Here's the flag of the United States, the constitutional republic which we were talking about, the world's greatest republic, with the oldest constitution, and it's there. It's the flag is one of our mugs, and we have lots of other mugs too. That's Britain, and we've got Greece there. We've got all sorts of countries, and if you want to suggest Australia too, if you want to suggest a country of your own, please do. And we've also got amazing enameled mugs also, which are the range of products on our shop is expanding, and they're wonderful. Then we've got amazing new shirts and we've also got an expanding library of ebooks. And of course, you support the Duran by buying things from our shop. So come to our shop, support the Duran, and own these great things for yourself.
You'll find the link to the Duran shop underneath this video, Alexander Mercouris. Take care, everybody.